2024 has been a good year for movies. A very good year. Not sure if that's the common sentiment, but that's what I'm feeling based on 65 so far, I think. But it also doesn't really feel like it for whatever reason. I'm wondering if maybe it's because I haven't been really blown away by anything yet so far this year, like no absolute favorites or anything that I would be sad to see surpassed or whatever. Like 2022, 2023, I can, immediately think of movies that really made an impact, like, like An After Sun, Resurrection, Tar, Past Lives, Falling in Love, like in movies, About Dry Grasses. Very memorable movies I cherish a lot. Don't really have any of those this year, except maybe Challengers. Challengers, just because that was a huge surprise and such a blast. Very rewatchable movie for me, which is unusual. I don't usually love rewatching movies. Regardless, still kind of looking for a movie, like some movies that really knocked my socks off this year. None of those movies I'm about to talk about fit that criteria, but I am a big fan of a couple of them. Like and subscribe, hit the bell. Feels weird saying that, but I don't know, maybe it helps. All right, first, Heretic. Two young missionaries are forced to prove their faith when they knock on the wrong door and are greeted by a diabolical Mr. Reed, coming ensnared in his deadly game of cat and mouse. So this is one of the movies I like quite a bit. I think it's pretty easy to sell. The two main qualities for me are Hugh Grant and the general, mystery, uncertainty. Like it calls it a cat and mouse game, which it kind of is. Just the general uncertainty and the finding out the way things progress, I suppose would be the way to put it. So in light of those two things being, like, I'm not going to describe the way things progress. I'm not going to spoil anything for this movie because I think that's pretty much the entire point, like all the fun. And then I think Hugh Grant is great. He's captivating, charismatic. He's engaging to listen to, which is going to be important for a movie like this where so much of the weight falls on character interactions, the dialogue, the things people have to say, and the implications of what they have to say as well. Hugh Grant leading that up, being so good in what is basically the movie's purpose, as far as I would characterize it, goes a long way. So between that and the mystery, just a great pairing, great experience, exhilarating, and it's, chiefly concerned with ideas and depictions of a couple characters. It is kind of dealing with Mormonism, specifically, although it does really touch on religion as a whole. There's a section that's talking about Judaism, Christianity, Islam as well, the main global religions. The film is principally concerned with, like I said, the dialogue and the interactions and all that stuff and the ideas, but it's not boring like around those things. I think of a movie like The Man from Earth, for example. Also a recommendation, completely different movie though. As an example of something that is chiefly concerned with the ideas, but doesn't have a whole lot of support around that. I guess, actors as well, but it is not very good looking. This movie is not like chiefly concerned with the style and whatnot. There are good elements, I would say, to the movie that make it still nice to watch, nice to look at, and at times adding like some nice atmosphere as well. Two strong main elements and some nice support around the edges as well. This movie I would very much recommend, especially if you're, kind of like into light thriller with, mystery elements, like fun, unpredictable rides. Would definitely recommend checking this one out. Next, Memoir of a Snail. Gracie recounts the struggles and misfortunes in her life that have led her to release a snail in her friend's garden. I was kind of considering not including this one because I don't really want to talk that much about movies I don't like. I think it's just more fun to talk about movies that I think are good and discuss good things about movies. I don't know. It could be interesting, I guess, to have a dissenting opinion out there. I mean, I know people like this movie a lot. I don't want to, be unnecessarily negative. If you're looking for a good movie, like odds are you will enjoy it. Like this is the best rated, I believe, of all these movies I'm going to touch on. So, I'm not saying don't watch it, but I will throw out a couple reasons why I think it does not work very well. But first, I will say I like the art direction a good amount. I like the gloomy, desolate backgrounds, the fact that so many scenes just have like an element of deadness, desaturation to them. Even like the hospital where Gracie is born, I just remember like that whole scene is very gloomy, which is of course fitting with the unfair amount of tragedies she faces in her life, the amount of sadness she deals with. So I like the way that backs up some ideas in the movie. I like some of the shots, some of the environments, like her room. I like the way that evolves and the way it reflects her as a person. The shot when Gilbert discovers fire for the first time in the kitchen or wherever he is. I think that's a great captivating shot. So there are good aesthetic qualities to it. It is is also claymation that is well done. But I mean, my main gripes are really like, I just feel like it's an alienating movie, and I don't think it's very respectful to the main character. Take this with a grain of salt, because I am generally pretty picky with movies that try to combine like kind of some tonal extremes. This movie has a lot of goofiness, really, a lot of jokes. It also is dealing with some heavy subject matter. I might be more picky than average on how that stuff works out. But that said, I think it has these tonal moments that undercut themselves. The very first real scene we get is in Pinky's hospice room or whatever. There's just like this over the top, like extremely intense breathing. It is unclear if it's supposed to be serious at first. Like you can see tears in Gracie's eyes. So there's clearly some element of sadness, but it's also very over the top and comedic, and she yells out like potatoes at the very end. At least I'm unsure what to do with that. Like I think I know the intent is supposed to be sad. Certainly we get that scene recontextualized later. Yes, it's definitely supposed to be sad, but to me, that's an example of a scene where it's still got like that jokey quality to it at the wrong time. There's another scene later on, a few scenes where, I won't spoil it right now, deals with a letter. And that, again, it's like, it's a serious emotional moment for the main character. It is riddled with jokes, and I don't understand how that just doesn't kill the effect, how it's not just like disrespectful to what the character is experiencing right then. Now, I do think there's an angle potentially with the amount of jokiness that the movie has. It's certainly possible it's trying to use humor basically as like a coping mechanism, which is, of course, certainly something people do. If that's the case, I get it. Good intent, creative idea, I suppose. But I think the specific places where it's heaviest, those two scenes I pointed out, I think were not fitting times for it. I could imagine other times in the movie where it's a little better to have some of that like feel like a coping mechanism, but I think it picks its spots poorly at the very best. Couple spoiler points. I will touch on the letter thing a little bit more. When she's reading Gilbert's letter not Gilbert's letter, the foster mom's letter, there's just so many jokes in that scene where he's getting like the gay conversion electrocution thing. I don't know. It's just so hard for me to square that silliness with like what's being depicted. Like this is kind of her whole positive, the positive situation in life that she's been building up. Like that's all coming crashing down right now, and the movie's just joking about it. I think that just feels terrible. The opening scene, the one with Pinky, less extreme, but that's just something that gets the movie off on bad footing. This is really bad. I can't imagine, but putting it together with the emotional impact that it has and filling it with humor. I don't know. I just can't rectify that. Do not like the ending. I feel like, again, that's going back on something the movie is saying, like, so like the movie has this metaphor of like the broken pot, put back together, restore the soul, whatever, all that stuff. Towards the end of the movie, she is starting to put the pieces back together, glue it back together, get her soul restored, etc. She's at the film festival. She's doing what she loves. She's animating. She's, her world is kind of improving a little bit. I don't understand how it's beneficial to bring back the brother. Again, to me, like, it's the movie about overcoming obstacles and overcoming the things that life throws at you that you have no control over, and persevering, making a good life out of it regardless. Like, we're just going to undo one of the defining moments of that. We're just going to make it so that she actually doesn't have to get over her brother's death. Like, that's actually not a problem. To me, that just feels so regressive and unhelpful for what the movie is trying to get across, especially for a movie that's depicting something that like really a lot of people struggle with. Certainly there are more and more movies coming out than ever about like mental health, discussing how people deal with that, how they sometimes can't deal with it. If we're talking about something real like this that I think is meant to be pretty relatable, I don't understand how that's helpful either. You can't magic the problems away. That's not going to happen in real life. I think that's a real problem. So I mean, yeah, I don't personally recommend the movie, but again, people like it. Odds are if you're watching the movie, you'll probably also like it. Just my 2 cents. Next is The Lighthouse. 2 lighthouse keepers try to maintain their sanity while living on a remote and mysterious New England island in the 1890s. The Lighthouse is obviously not a new movie. Came out in 2019. I watched a 5th anniversary rescreening in IMAX. 3rd time I've watched it, once in theaters, once with a director's commentary, and then this one. I'm kind of a little surprised about how much foothold this movie has. Like, I think it's over 1 million watches on Letterboxd. I guess it just hits the weirdness sweet spot just right. Fun to recommend to friends, but it's not so strange that, it feels like pretentious or, like it's trying too hard or whatever, as if trying hard is a bad thing. Whatever it is, I'm glad this is a movie that got a lot of attention. Still does. It's a movie I respect a lot. I am still not convinced it comes together all that cleanly, but I certainly do not mind watching it multiple times. This will probably not be the last time I ever watch it, because it is a very interesting movie. I am still a little bit on the fence about the way it uses humor. Might sound a little bit familiar from literally the last movie I talked about. But in this case, I think I can more easily see the benefit, because I think it contributes to that, looming sense of madness. It may seem weird, like in theory, to have, some like the first farts we hear mixed with some of like the more heavy atmospheric music and visuals, like it kind of seems like that's too much levity for a movie that looks and feels very oppressive and sounds very oppressive. But I think it emphasizes like the obstacle is less something supernatural and it's more human. The thing that Robert Pattinson is fighting against, at least so it seems at first, the main thing we see him fighting against is just the human conflict, the things about the captain or the lighthouse keeper, forget his name because I'm bad with names, that bother him, that add up over time, like the little human annoyances. Like everyone can relate to that. The film has like this kind of dark tone and a dark conflict, but it comes from things that don't seem very serious. The farts, the cooking, the isolation, being cooped up with someone, being subject to someone's authority, all these things. So I think it's a strange combination that does kind of work. I see the thought behind it. Even something like the Hark monologue. To me, it still kind of feels like it's a little random, but again, it is spurred on by the cooking, the lobster, right? It is spurred on by the tiny little human conflicts that can add up. Still don't feel like it hits quite right. I get the utility. I think, a purpose for what it's going for. It still feels a little bit scattered to me personally. I guess I would prefer it be a little more consistent with the darkness, but again, I appreciate it's doing something a little different. Love the music, especially the opening scene, the way it uses the foghorn and the waves, crashing against the ship's bow. The sound is really great as well. I think I said earlier, it's pretty overwhelming for especially Robert Pattinson's character, who is, shoveling coal and stuff like that, and the foghorn blasting him. The environment is great. The stark black and white outside, the high contrast stuff, all the shadows inside, very claustrophobic, daunting. Willem Dafoe is awesome. I like him a little better than Robert Pattinson, maybe actually a lot better. Not that Robert Pattinson is bad or anything. I just instantly buy Willem Dafoe's character, whereas I think Robert Pattinson's takes a little bit to settle in. Lots to like. Technically, just fantastic movie. It's popular already, so you've probably already seen it. But if you haven't, would absolutely recommend checking it out. Then last, I'm going to talk about A Real Pain, which is a 2024 movie. Mismatched cousins, David and Benji, reunite for a tour through Poland to honor their beloved grandmother. The adventure takes a turn when the pair's old tensions resurface against the backdrop of their family history. This is one of the better odd couple movies I think that I've seen. It mirrors like the real life complexity in relationships, in dealing with other people. This illogical sort of combination of envy and worry that David feels is extremely unique and well incorporated into many different scenes, many different aspects of the movie. Both leads are great, both Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. Jesse Eisenberg's script is quite good. The movie technically is not, mesmerizing. It's not show stealing. The writing, I think, appropriately should be. Writing and performances should be. But it does, I think, accent the film well in some ways. Like it stays moving really nicely with the editing. Editing is also used nicely with sound in a couple spots. Kieran Culkin's wardrobe, especially for his establishing shot, I think is really great. This is not a movie I was especially looking forward to going into it. It's kind of just checking a box for 2024, but it won me over pretty quick. It's very interesting, very thoughtful. It is maybe doing it a little bit of a disservice, I guess, to just call it an odd couple movie. It is more than that. It's got more on its mind. It's got a exploration of sorts of, Holocaust, Jewish history, and how that relates to the way we process pain and grief, the way we use blessings in our life, privileges, the way we can lose track of genuine pain, lose track of history in the past, in the wake of, trying to either insulate ourselves from that pain, or I don't think there's an or to that, actually. That was just the main thing. It's actually an excellent title as well, I think, in relation, right, to the Holocaust, the Jewish history, and in addition to the, odd couple nature, right? The title of A Real Pain can both refer to Kieran Culkin's character, who is a real pain, as someone who certainly relates more to David than Benji. But there's also the, a real pain as the real pain that people experience in a couple of different ways. So, I mean, like, you could call it a triple entendre of a title, I think, once you finish the whole movie. So I think that's a small thing to praise a movie for, but I like the title a lot. All that to say, you know, if the idea of just, you know, two cousins butting heads, learning from each other, whatever, does not sound appealing, I just want to reassure you, that's not all the movie is. Would highly recommend it. This is one of my favorites of the year so far. So that's the most recent run of movies from 2024 I've watched. Do you have any thoughts on these? If so, then, you know, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.